When the 6th generation commenced, EA looked to branch out a bit from their typical sports games and created a separate subsidiary called EA Sports. The brand kicked off with the PlayStation 2's launch title, SSX, creating an over-the-top, exhilarating snowboarding experience. Then they brought that style over to basketball with the superb NBA Street. The next sport to receive the big treatment was Freekstyle, a motocross game that aims to provide that exhilarating over-the-top experience for motocross in the way that SSX did for snowboarding. Developed by EA Redwood Shores and Page 44 Studios and ported to the GameCube by Hypnos Entertainment, is Freekstyle a game to freak out about, or does it eat dirt right out of the gate? Let's find out. Freekstyle is very much an arcade-style racing game at its core, but incorporates the trick system heavily to provide this hybrid experience. It's essentially SSX Tricky, but on motocross. You will choose one of the various riders, all being a cast of characters for sure. While all the actual riders are from within the scene itself, they are made to feel a bit more stylish and match the game's aesthetic and presentation. Riders like Mike Metzger, Brian Deegan, Mike Jones, Clifford Adoptante, Steffi Bow, Jessica Patterson, Greg Albertin, and a former motocross announcer, Leanne Tweeden. The game's circuit mode is the meat and bones of the core Freekstyle experience. Upon choosing one of the riders, you will proceed through their campaign, which will consist of 14 events. The first 6 events will have you racing along each of the game's wild tracks. Each race event consists of 3 heats, where you must place in the top 3 of the first 2 heats, and the final heat requires that you get first place to complete the whole event and move on. Once you complete the 6th event, you will then open up the Freekstyle mode. This has you going back to each of the 6 racetracks to go for a high score within a single run, while also ensuring that you place first in the race itself. You'll race against 5 other opponents at once, and they won't make it a walk in the park for you either. Controls are very responsive and really makes for an engaging experience right out of the gate. The trick system is simple to grasp, but will be challenging to nail the timing of certain tricks and maximizing your points. The L, R, X, and Y buttons all do different tricks, and combining pressing these buttons down will all provide for a variety of over-the-top tricks to pull off. Furthermore, pressing down the Z button with the combined trick buttons that you press down will tweak a trick, typically continuing the animation of the basic form factor of that trick you are doing. The more complex the trick, the more points you'll get. What you'll need to master later in the game is learning how to hold down your basic form of a trick before tweaking it and landing it just right so you can really maximize those points. Also, as you advance, you'll get new bikes that not only boost certain stats a bit more, but also provide tricks specifically tailored to those bikes. As you complete tricks, you will fill up both the boost meter, indicated in the beige color, and your freakout meter, indicated in the red color. If you fill up the red meter, the Freekstyle face logo will start shaking around, letting you know you've got a little bit of time to pull off your character's special trick.
Okay, now freak 'em out!
These are always immensely gratifying to see in action. Every character has their own unique special, each based on the bike that they have equipped as well. You only have a limited amount of time to stay in this mode, as indicated by the counter on the bottom left of the HUD, but pulling off tricks will increase the time duration. Should you crash though, you will lose your freakout meter entirely during this state. Thankfully, crashing or bailing while building up the freakout meter will cost you a small portion of the meter. You can also complete a rider's trick book and discover combos to pull off in the character select screen, and doing so will also unlock alternate outfits for that character.
Who else could pull this off?
In terms of the game's tracks, while not an insane amount, they all are very well designed and memorable. Whether ripping through monumental Motoplex as you get your bearings, the industrial crust belt factory, the mountains of Burn It Up, the garden maze that is Gnome Sweet Gnome, the vibrant Let It Ride in Vegas, or the SpaceX location that is Rocket Garden, each track is massive and full of life. There's a sense of scale that is staggering, whether it's the actual set pieces themselves that you'll race along, or the insane jumps, all while having a great draw distance to further emphasize the game's scope. And when you're looking to focus on strictly freestyle tracks, there are 3 here you can tackle. Feel the Pain is all about hitting those jumps and trying to trick through and shatter the glass panes in the center of the track. Crash Pad is just you in the terrain launching off of jumps left by the construction crew surrounding a single house that was just looking for a little bit of peace and quiet, but let's face it, that ain't happening here. And lastly, upon finishing the circuit, you will unlock the Burbs, which is easily the most expansive course to trick on in the game, and one that I revisited more times than I'd like to admit. Aside from the circuit mode, there is a single race mode to tackle any of the 6 courses to race on, and you can even choose from one of 4 difficulties here. Then there's a freestyle mode, letting you trick one of the 3 specific courses here. And there's a freeride mode, which as it insinuates, is all about going at your own pace and trying to perfect your runs, maybe looking for all the shortcuts before tackling them in the circuit if you're having a hard time. Granted, for these modes, you can only play that which you've unlocked at that time. Then there's the 2-player multiplayer. When you plug in the second controller, the option will be available from within the single race and freestyle modes within the main menu. In single race multiplayer, you can do a simple head-to-head race or the more exciting countdown mode. Countdown mode has both players start with a set amount of points that counts down, and players will need to do tricks and go fast to keep the points from rapidly decreasing. When in freestyle multiplayer, there is a simple head-to-head like with the race mode, but also 2 more modes, Tag and King of Pain. Tag has players trying to hit the crates and mark it as their own, but the opposing player can steal the crate to count as their point. The player with the most crates tagged wins. As for King of Pain, this has players competing to see who can break the most window panes in the Field of Pain track. No matter the choice, the multiplayer options here are a lot of fun, and it makes for a solid pick when friends are over. Now, Freekstyle is a game that is easy to enjoy thanks to its adrenaline-fueled gameplay, but I will say, the pacing does feel a little bit off in the circuit mode. Race events across all 3 heats will take upwards of 20 to 25 minutes to complete, and if you don't place in that heat, you'll have to restart that current heat that you didn't advance in, further making this a longer process to complete. With the game's difficulty, definitely expect to repeat races quite a bit. Then once you actually unlock the Freekstyle events in the campaign, the rest of the game kind of flies by for the character's campaign itself and leads to far faster upgrading opportunities as well. I wish they mixed up the races and freestyle events, or at least made it more open to the player to choose what to tackle first between the 2 modes of play, kind of like how SSX Tricky was. Another gripe I had was that I felt sometimes the timing of landing tricks could be random. There were numerous instances where I thought I would have landed a trick safely, letting go of the button at the right time to only find myself bailing, while there are others where I would let go of holding a trick a little longer than intended and would shockingly land safely. It just led to a little bit of random frustration during events where almost every trick counts for either score or building up your boost meter, and the reliability sometimes wasn't there. And as mentioned, the difficulty can be brutal. You need to acquire a boost every chance you can and stay ahead of the pack. But furthermore, finding the track's shortcuts and perfectly navigating those is key to success. Do not be surprised if you have a hard time beating this game. Now, visually, Freekstyle is an excellent looking game to say the least. Characters here are all very sharply detailed with loads of animations that are so smooth. Seeing the hundreds of tricks that riders can do is immensely gratifying and does for the motocross scene trick-wise that SSX does with the snowboarding scene. It really gives the tricks so much more flair and style, and each combination of tricks that you do looks even more impressive in motion the more advanced the trick is. Even crashing has the rider flying across it in an exaggerated motion that is pretty humorous. Courses are all richly detailed as well, with sharp textures, animated objects from within the terrain, and all while maintaining a locked 60 frames per second. The visual effects are also a nice touch, like the blur effect when boosting, and it's even more emphasized when in freakout mode. I will say, the 2-player mode does have some occasional frame rate drops where it can bring it down to 30 frames per second, but that's understandable considering that it was already impressive that the single player runs at 60 frames with all the visual aspects in place. Even the fire effects are some of the more impressive ones on the console first generation. The overall presentation for Freekstyle is just fantastic. As for Freekstyle's audio, the package here is definitely on the strong side. The roaring sound of the bike's engine, the character banters amongst each other during races, the ambiance of every track, whether it's birds flying by when you're jumping over a mountain or a rocket launching from an actual silo, to the immensely gratifying sound effects when you freak out in the game, it really is an audio package that immerses you right from the get-go. And if that doesn't do it, the game's excellent soundtrack will. Whether it's the songs composed by in-house composers the Humble Brothers, who have done some of the music for the Need for Speed series, to also the outstanding song Slip Away by Dry Cell in the game's intro that's used in the game itself as well, the soundtrack here will definitely get the blood flowing during races. While Freekstyle never gained the popularity the SSX franchise garnered, the end result was a game that perfectly translated the motocross experience with this over-the-top arcade-style gameplay that is exhilarating from start to finish. From its excellent visuals and animations, smooth as butter frame rate, memorable track designs, fun character roster to play as, great soundtrack, all packaged up in an excellent audio experience and gratifying gameplay loop for the most part, Freekstyle is a game very much worth your time. While I do wish the pacing of the circuit mode was a little bit faster and smoother, it does demand mastering the tracks with each run. It's a challenging racing game, but it's easily the best motocross game ever made.